They laughed when I lost everything. Not strangers. Not co-workers. My own children. They stood there in what used to be my living room, my life packed into brown cardboard boxes, my name already scraped off the mailbox, and they laughed like my pain was entertainment. Like 40 years of sacrifice had turned into a punchline. I didn't say a word. I just stood there holding my keys, realizing they didn't open anything anymore. That laugh stayed with me. Because what they didn't understand, what they couldn't imagine, was that the truth doesn't disappear just because you bury it. It waits. And when it comes out, it changes everything. My name is Frank Miller. I'm 63 years old. And this is the story of how I lost everything, and how the people who laughed the loudest never expected what came next. Before you see what happens next in my life, subscribe to this channel. And if you've ever felt betrayed by the people you trusted most, leave a comment telling me your city or country. You're not as alone as you think. Now let me tell you how it all began. For most of my life, I was invisible in the best way. I was the man who showed up early and left late. The man who paid bills before buying himself anything new. The man who believed that if you worked hard and loved your family, everything else would fall into place. I worked at the same manufacturing plant for 38 years. Same building. Same smell of oil and metal. Same steel-toed boots by the door every night. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, even my wife's favorite holidays. But I told myself it was temporary. That someday it would all be worth it. I built that life brick by brick. I paid for my son Daniel's college tuition without asking questions. I helped my daughter Melissa with the down payment on her first house. I emptied my savings more than once so my family wouldn't have to struggle. I didn't complain. That's what a father does. People used to call me dependable. Solid. The kind of man you could lean on. And then, one Tuesday morning, it was all gone. They gathered us into a conference room that felt colder than usual. The plant manager cleared his throat like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. Global restructuring. Market changes. Hard decisions. In less than 10 minutes, my job, my identity, was reduced to a severance package and a handshake. At 61 years old, I walked out carrying a cardboard box with a coffee mug, a photo of my wife, and a plaque that said, 38 years of service. No applause. No goodbye. Just silence. At first, I tried to stay positive. I told myself I'd find something else. But employers don't line up for men with gray hair, a bad knee, and skills they consider outdated. Interviews stopped coming. Savings started shrinking. That's when the jokes began. At Sunday dinners, Daniel would grin and say, "Must be nice, Dad. Early retirement." Melissa would laugh and add, "Just don't get too comfortable on that couch." They laughed. Everyone did. I laughed too, because admitting it hurt felt like admitting weakness. Then my wife got sick. Cancer doesn't announce itself politely. It sneaks in and takes over your life inch by inch. Hospital rooms replaced family dinners. The house grew quieter. I watched the strongest woman I knew fade away while I pretended to be strong enough for both of us. When she died, something inside me went quiet too. The house felt empty in a way I can't explain. Her coffee mug still by the sink. Her sweater still hanging in the closet. I slept on the couch most nights because the bedroom felt unbearable. That's when my children started helping. Daniel said he was worried about me living alone. Melissa said I looked tired, distracted, forgetful. They spoke softly, kindly, concerned. They suggested I let them handle a few things, just temporarily. Paying bills. Organizing paperwork. Making sure I didn't miss deadlines. "You've done enough, Dad," Melissa said, touching my arm. "Let us take care of you now." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. They brought papers. Lots of them. Long documents with small print and words I didn't fully understand. They told me it was just to make things easier. To avoid stress. To protect me. I hesitated. Daniel smiled and said, "You trust us, right?" I signed. That decision still haunts me. At first, nothing seemed different. Bills were paid. Groceries appeared in my fridge. Daniel checked in more often. Melissa stopped by with meals. Then little things started changing. My debit card stopped working one afternoon. Daniel said it was probably the bank. A letter arrived saying my mortgage terms had been adjusted. Melissa said it was just paperwork. When I asked questions, they reassured me. When I worried, they laughed it off. "Dad, you're overthinking again," Melissa said. I wanted to believe that too. But deep down, something felt wrong. 6 months later, I opened my mailbox and found an envelope addressed to current occupant. My name wasn't on it. That night, I asked Daniel about it. He didn't meet my eyes. "Don't worry about stuff like that," he said. "We've got everything under control." That's when I started checking. Quietly. Old emails. Old statements. Anything I could find. What I saw made my stomach drop. Accounts I didn't recognize. Transfers I didn't approve. My name missing where it should have been. Before I could confront them, the final blow came. I came home from a doctor's appointment one afternoon, and my key didn't work. I tried again. And again. The door didn't open. Daniel opened it from the inside. Behind him stood Melissa, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You can't stay here anymore," Daniel said. I thought it was a joke. A misunderstanding. I asked what he meant. Melissa finally spoke. "It's better this way, Dad. For everyone." I asked where I was supposed to go. That's when they laughed. Not awkwardly. Not nervously. They laughed like my confusion was ridiculous. Daniel shrugged. "You'll figure something out. You always do." And just like that, the life I spent decades building was gone. No job. No home. No family standing beside me. Only their laughter echoing behind a locked door. And that was just the beginning. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time after they closed the door. I don't know how long. Minutes. Maybe an hour. People drove by. Neighbors walked past. No one stopped. No one asked why a 63-year-old man was standing there with a small bag in his hand, staring at a house that no longer belonged to him. I finally turned away because standing there felt worse than leaving. I walked. I didn't know where I was going, but my feet kept moving like they'd done it 1,000 times before. That's what work had trained me to do. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't think. I ended up at a cheap motel near the highway. The kind of place that smells like old carpet and regret. I paid cash for 3 nights. The clerk didn't look at me twice. That first night I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the hum of traffic outside, replaying their laughter in my head. Every smile. Every reassuring word. Every paper I signed without reading closely enough. I wasn't just angry. I was ashamed. I raised them better than this. Or at least I thought I did. The next morning, reality hit hard. I checked my wallet. 1 debit card. No cash. No credit cards. I tried the card at the motel vending machine. Declined. That sinking feeling returned, heavier than before. I walked across the street to a gas station and asked the cashier if I could check my balance. She slid the terminal toward me. 0. Not low. Not pending. 0. My hands started shaking. I called the bank from the parking lot. After 20 minutes on hold, a polite voice told me the account had been closed. Closed. I asked how that was possible. She said the authorized account holder had requested it. I told her I was the account holder. There was a pause. "Sir," she said carefully, "your name is no longer listed." That was the moment I understood. They hadn't just pushed me out of the house. They erased me. I spent the next few days making calls. Daniel didn't answer. Melissa sent one text, "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder. Like losing your job, your wife, your home, and your dignity wasn't hard enough. By the fourth day, the motel manager knocked on my door and reminded me checkout time was at 11. I didn't have money to extend. I packed my bag and left. I slept in my car that night. I told myself it was temporary. Just until I figured things out. But the truth is, something changes in you the first night you sleep sitting up, wrapped in an old jacket, listening for footsteps. You realize how thin the line really is. The next morning, I went to the public library. Not for books. For the computers. I hadn't used one in years beyond basic email, but desperation makes you learn fast. I searched my own name. Property records. Financial filings. Anything. And that's when I saw it. The house had been transferred. Not sold. Transferred. To my daughter. 6 months earlier. The date matched the day she brought those papers over and smiled at me across the kitchen table. My hands clenched into fists. I kept digging. Loan documents. Power of attorney filings. Account authorizations. Everything was legal on paper. My signature was everywhere. I sat there staring at the screen until my eyes burned. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. Instead, I logged out and walked outside. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg. And I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I remembered something my wife used to say when things got tough. Slow down, she'd say. Look closer. The truth always leaves fingerprints. So I slowed down. I started writing everything down. Dates. Conversations. Who said what and when. I visited the county clerk's office and requested copies of everything tied to my name. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, glanced at the documents and then at me. You didn't know about this? She asked quietly. I shook my head. She slid the papers toward me. You should talk to a lawyer. I laughed bitterly. With what money? She hesitated, then scribbled a name on a sticky note. Tell him I sent you. That lawyer's office was small. Old furniture. Faded diplomas on the wall. The man himself looked about my age. He listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't judge. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed. They were thorough, he said. But they weren't perfect. That was the first time in months I felt something other than despair. Hope. He explained things slowly. Where they crossed lines. Where intent mattered. Where undue influence could be proven. It won't be fast, he warned. And it won't be easy. I nodded. I've worked my whole life, I said. I can wait. In the weeks that followed, my life shrank to essentials. A church shelter at night. Day labor jobs when I could get them. Library during the day. I didn't tell anyone who I used to be. I just listened. You learn a lot when people think you have nothing to lose. I heard stories worse than mine. Fathers abandoned. Mothers tricked. Grandparents erased. I wasn't alone. Meanwhile, my lawyer worked quietly. He requested records. Sent letters. Asked questions that made people uncomfortable. Daniel called me one afternoon. His voice was different. Tight. You didn't have to do this, he said. I asked him what he meant. You're embarrassing us, he snapped. People are asking questions. That told me everything I needed to know. Melissa showed up at the shelter one evening. She looked around like the place offended her. This isn't necessary, she said. We can talk like adults. I asked her why. She laughed. She didn't answer. She just said, You should let this go. I looked at her. The daughter I once carried on my shoulders, who used to fall asleep on my chest during late-night movies. I already lost everything, I said quietly. What exactly do you think I'm holding on to? She left without another word. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because for the first time since that laugh echoed in my ears, I knew something they didn't. The truth was moving. and it was moving toward the light. The first rail crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the day because it was raining, the kind of steady rain that soaks through everything slowly, quietly, like betrayal. I was sitting in the library, the same corner desk I'd started to claim as my own, when my lawyer called. "Frank," he said, "I need you to come by." His tone wasn't excited. It wasn't cautious either. It was focused. That was enough. I caught 2 buses across town, watching water streak down dirty windows, thinking about how strange life had become. Not long ago, I'd been worried about retirement accounts and lawn maintenance. Now I was measuring days by bus schedules and free coffee refills. When I walked into his office, he didn't offer small talk. He slid a folder across the desk. "Do you remember your wife's old email account?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "She barely used it. Mostly recipes and church stuff." "Well," he said, tapping the folder, "someone accessed it after she passed." My chest tightened. He explained that during the financial transfers, documents had been sent not only from my email, but from hers. Digital confirmations, consent acknowledgments, time-stamped approvals. "Your wife couldn't have sent these," he said gently. "She was already gone." I stared at the papers. The handwriting wasn't hers either. Sloppy. Rushed. Forgery. For the first time, the story wasn't just about me being careless or weak. It was about them crossing a line they couldn't walk back from. My lawyer continued. "That alone raises serious questions. But there's more." He showed me IP logs. Access locations. One address kept repeating. Melissa's house. I closed my eyes. I wanted to remember her as a child. Missing teeth. Grass-stained knees. The way she used to run into my arms after school. That image felt like it belonged to another lifetime. "This changes things?" I said. He nodded. "It changes everything." From that day on, the pace shifted. Letters turned into subpoenas. Questions turned into formal requests. Whispers started traveling through places I no longer belonged to. Daniel left another voicemail. This time, there was no anger. Just panic. "Dad, please," he said. "This is getting out of hand. We can fix this." Fix. That word again. I didn't call him back. Instead, I focused on rebuilding something I hadn't realized I'd lost, my sense of self. At the shelter, people started noticing the change. I stood straighter. I spoke less, but with purpose. I stopped apologizing for existing. One man named Harold, Vietnam vet, rough voice, kind eyes, sat beside me one night and said, "Whatever you're dealing with, you're not done yet." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "No," I said. "I'm not." A few days later, something unexpected happened. A woman approached me outside the library. Late 40s. Neatly dressed. Nervous energy. "Frank?" she asked. I nodded cautiously. "My name is Linda," she said. "I used to work for your daughter." That stopped me cold. She glanced around before continuing. "I didn't know who you were at first. I only put it together after the legal letters started coming in." She swallowed. "I quit," she said. "I couldn't be part of it anymore." We sat on a bench under an awning while rain dripped from the edge like a ticking clock. Linda told me everything. How Melissa had asked her to scan documents. How she'd been told to use my wife's email, just to keep things consistent. How Daniel had joked about me being too old to notice. She handed me a flash drive. "I kept copies," she said. "I don't know why. Something felt wrong." My hands trembled as I took it. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. When my lawyer saw the contents, he leaned back slowly and let out a long breath. "They're in serious trouble," he said. For the first time, he didn't sound cautious. He sounded certain. That certainty rippled outward. Daniel stopped calling. Melissa's lawyer started calling instead. Offers were floated. Quiet settlements. Conditions. All of them required one thing: my silence. I refused. Not because I wanted revenge, but because silence was what got me here in the first place. The court date was set. The weeks leading up to it were the hardest and the clearest of my life. I stayed at the shelter, even when my lawyer offered to help arrange something else. I needed to remember what this felt like. Needed to carry it with me. At night, I lay awake thinking about my wife. What would she say if she saw me now? I imagined her voice steady and calm. "Tell the truth," she'd say. "The rest will take care of itself." The morning of the hearing, I wore the same suit I'd worn to her funeral. It didn't fit the way it used to. Hung a little looser. But it felt right. When I walked into the courtroom, they were already there. Daniel avoided my eyes. Melissa stared straight ahead, jaw tight. For a moment, I saw fear flicker across her face. They laughed when I lost everything. They weren't laughing now. As the judge took the bench and the room settled into silence, I felt something settle inside me too. I wasn't here as a victim anymore. I was here as a witness. And the truth was finally ready to speak. The courtroom felt colder than the shelter ever did. Not in temperature, something deeper. The kind of cold that comes from people waiting to see who will fall and who will walk away untouched. Wooden benches. Pale walls. The quiet hum of authority. I took my seat behind my lawyer and folded my hands to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, Daniel sat stiffly in a dark suit that looked too tight at the shoulders. Melissa sat beside him, her face carefully composed, the way she used to look during parent-teacher conferences when she was a child caught doing something she knew was wrong. Their lawyer whispered to them urgently. No one laughed now. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. And just like that, the truth stopped being private. My lawyer began slowly. Carefully. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He laid out the timeline. Job loss. My wife's illness. Her death. The sudden help. The papers. The transfer of property. The empty accounts. The locked door. Each point landed like a quiet weight. When he showed the signatures, Melissa shifted in her chair. When he introduced the email records, Daniel's jaw clenched. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Your Honor, my lawyer said, we have reason to believe these communications were sent after Mrs. Miller's death. The room stirred. The judge leaned forward. Explain. My lawyer did. Timestamps. Access logs. IP addresses. Melissa's address. Her lawyer objected. Procedural. Technical. But the judge allowed the evidence. And then Linda was called to the stand. She walked in slowly, shoulders tense, hands folded tight in front of her. She looked at Melissa for only a second before turning away. Linda's voice shook at first, but steadied as she spoke. She explained how she'd been instructed to scan and send documents. How she was told to access my wife's email account. Just for convenience. How jokes were made about me being confused, old, replaceable. Every word stripped something away. I watched Melissa's face change, not dramatically, not all at once. But piece by piece. Confidence faded first. Then control. Then the mask. When Linda handed over the flash drive and the judge reviewed its contents, the room felt smaller. He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Miss Miller, he said to Melissa, do you deny these actions? She didn't answer right away. Her lawyer whispered furiously. She swallowed. No, she said finally. Daniel stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. When it was my turn to testify, I stood slowly. Every step toward the stand felt heavy, but clear. I told the truth. I didn't embellish. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I spoke about trust. About believing that family meant safety. About how easily kindness can be used as a weapon. When I finished, the judge nodded once. That nod meant more than any apology ever could. The defense tried to argue intent, misunderstandings, stress, family dynamics. But intent doesn't erase action, and action leaves trails. By the end of the day, the room felt drained. The judge announced a recess and said he would issue a ruling soon. Outside the courtroom, Daniel approached me. His face was pale. His voice barely held together. "Dad," he said, "I didn't know it went that far." I looked at him. "You laughed," I said quietly. He had no answer. Melissa didn't come near me. She left through a side door. That night, I didn't go back to the shelter. My lawyer had arranged a small room in a quiet place. Nothing fancy. Clean. Safe. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. Winning didn't feel like I'd imagined. It felt heavy. 2 days later, the ruling came. Fraud. Undue influence. Abuse of power of attorney. The transfers were invalidated. The accounts were frozen pending restoration. The house would return to my name. Melissa would face further legal consequences. Daniel would not. The judge looked directly at me when he said, "What was taken from you will be returned. What was broken may take longer." I nodded. Outside, reporters waited. I said nothing. Silence, I'd learned, could be powerful when chosen. Weeks passed. The house was quiet when I walked back in. Empty rooms. Dust in the corners. No laughter. No echoes. Just space. Melissa didn't call. Daniel did once. He asked if we could talk. I told him maybe. Not yet. I stood in the living room where they had laughed. I closed my eyes. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. They had laughed when I lost everything. Now they were learning what the truth costs. The house didn't feel like home when I moved back in. It was quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful yet. The walls were bare where pictures used to hang. The furniture was gone, sold, donated, or discarded without a second thought. Even the air felt different, like it was waiting to see what kind of man would live there now. I slept on a mattress on the floor that first night. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to remember. Every creak of the house echoed memories. My wife laughing in the kitchen. Daniel running through the hallway as a boy. Melissa sitting at the table doing homework, asking me to check her math. That was the hardest part of betrayal. Not the money. Not the house. It was realizing the people you loved most were willing to erase you, and still sleep at night. The court ruling made things official, but it didn't magically fix my life. Paper can return property. It can't restore trust. I spent weeks cleaning. Slowly. Room by room. I didn't rush. Every sweep of the broom felt like reclaiming something small but important. Neighbors stopped by. Some apologized for not stepping in sooner. Some avoided my eyes entirely. I didn't hold it against them. Fear makes cowards of good people. Daniel came over one afternoon. He stood on the porch like a stranger, hands in his pockets, eyes tired. "I just want to talk," he said. I considered shutting the door. Instead, I stepped aside. We sat in the living room on folding chairs. No couch. No comfort. Just truth between us. "I didn't plan it like that," he said quickly. "Melissa handled most of it. I thought it was just temporary. I swear." I listened. Then I asked one question. "Why did you laugh?" He stared at the floor. "I don't know," he whispered. Maybe because admitting what we were doing felt worse. That answer told me everything. "I love you," I said. "But love doesn't mean access anymore." He nodded, tears slipping down his face. That was the last time we spoke for a long while. Melissa never came. Her lawyer sent letters. Her name appeared in legal updates. Her voice disappeared from my life. And strangely, I felt lighter. Months passed. I found part-time work at a hardware store. Nothing fancy. But it felt good to earn again. To be seen as useful. To hear someone say, "Thanks, Frank. We appreciate you." I started volunteering at the shelter where I once slept. I didn't tell my story unless someone asked. When they did, I didn't dress it up. I told them the truth. That betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. That family can hurt you deeper than strangers ever could. And that losing everything doesn't mean losing yourself. One evening, as I locked up the shelter office, I caught my reflection in the glass. Older. Thinner. But steadier. The laughter that once haunted me had faded. In its place was something stronger. Clarity. I understood now that dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you refuse to surrender, even when everything else is taken. A year later, I stood in the same living room where they once laughed at me. Only this time, I was standing tall. The house was modestly furnished again. Photos back on the walls. My wife's picture above the fireplace, just where it belonged. Daniel sends cards sometimes. Short. Careful. Respectful. I read them. I don't always respond. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a deadline. It's a boundary. As for Melissa, I wish her no harm. But I no longer wish her well at the cost of my peace. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. They need to stay burned so you remember not to cross them again. They laughed when I lost everything. They thought that moment defined me. They were wrong. Because the truth didn't just come out. It stood up. And so did I. If you're listening to this and you feel invisible, if the people you trusted turned your kindness into a weakness, if you've lost more than you can explain, know this. Your story isn't over. Sometimes losing everything is how you finally find what can never be taken from you. And that is something worth standing for.